mistrusted doors that opened automatically, especially after being buried for millennia. Was this some sort of trap? Come too late. There had to be something useful in these things, didn't there? Sword. Ice wall. Ice cube. Energy spheres. Easy to dodge, but boy do they sting if you didn't pay attention. his friend is a swan. Can he join up and rise his feathers? Not get past this point. Obviously, the temple builders knew how to deal with Tomb Raider. There was an engraving. Maximum capacity, 130 people. Purest blackness. It reflected no light, like a void made solid. Nervous, he picked it up. I can make you mighty. Who said that? Give blood. It was the stone. Eager, thirsty. That seemed tempting and terribly wrong. Zenobia was the Emperor's greatest general and a potent witch. But they had been close once, and Renato wasn't sure he really wanted to be Emperor. Why not capture the core of Skyripper instead? It was the eye of a lost god torn out by the transcendent Emperor to power his greatest weapon. "It's the core," said the stone. Bothered him. He hated being told what to do. Wasn't that why he joined the rebellion? Wasn't that why he'd refused to be a soldier? He'd agreed to come on board only if he could freelance. The stone felt a bit clingy. The sage Calaveras had told him where to find the Skyripper, a weapon capable of challenging the gods. Even without its armature, the core would still possess great power. He would go there. The moment he landed the Farfarer, Reynardo had a rare feeling of regret. It's not too late, he thought. He could turn around and sell for Zenobia's island. He frowned. Wait a minute. He didn't want to kill Zenobia, did he? Sure, technically she was the enemy, but they'd been at Sword Food School together. They'd never been lovers, but somehow they'd been closer. She'd told him every secret about herself. Except the biggest one. That she was the Emperor's daughter. No. Kill Zenobia, whispered the stone. Before it's too late. Something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time.
Almost never saw wild gogglers together like this. The toads had to train them not to peck each other to death. So these had to be Imperial gogglers. That meant ravens were up ahead. He felt like Tarzan.
The stone hadn't lied about what it could do for him. With each raven he cut down, he felt a jolt of power flowing into his arm. "You're weak," whispered the stone. "The Common will kill you." "Are you afraid of it?" "No, don't be ridiculous," it chuckled. "But it's unstable. It will poison you so much as carry it, and if you try to use it, it will explode catastrophically." Reynardo did not trust rocks that talked in his head. He went onwards.
This chest contained a Vorpal sword. I'm just kidding. Vorpal swords don't exist.
Smashing things was fun. This couldn't be good for global warming. As he approached the core, the stone became hysterical.
No, it's too much power. We will rip a hole in space and time.
He had a sudden vision of plunging his gauntlet into the core and dying in anguish. That wasn't his vision, was it? The stone had sent him its darkest fears, hadn't it? He had a sudden impulse to do exactly that. He raised his right fist and plunged it into the core. There was a rush of light. He thought he could hear the stone screaming. And then he passed out. When Ronaldo came to, the core was gone. But the Iblis stone was no longer black, but glowing with a blue light. And it was silent. "I can't hear you," he sang out, and "Yoo-hoo!" It didn't answer. "Ha!" he said. He had defeated the demonic gem with the power of his mind. He felt invincible. It was time to attack the Imperial outpost on the Nexus. Take the battle to the enemy. But among the huge crystals, there was also an observatory. A wise man would probably ask the scientists exactly what he had first. How wise was he? As the Farfarer made its way toward the Nexus, Bernardo watched sparks fly out of the core. The Iblis stone sucked them in hungrily. You'd think the stone would want this kind of power, wouldn't it? Thought Bernardo. Well, the scientists would explain it all. This time, Bernardo was sure he'd figured out how to use the core safely. See?
He'd trusted his gut, and it had worked out. That's what it meant to be a hero. To ignore the naysayers and the odd-makers, and do what you knew was right, and have it turn out to be the right thing. No, he wasn't worried. Once he got to the observatory, the scientist toads could explain it. Then he could carry the war into the enemy's camp and destroy them all. Oh dear, he was getting a little bloodthirsty, wasn't he?
What was really fun was hooking yourself onto a moving ship.
Renato wondered what would happen if he jumped. Would he be rescued by an emergency platform? Renato went to the china shop. For some reason, the owner was always nervous. Renato had never felt better in his life. Normally, a battle would wear him down and he would need a night's sleep. Now he felt like he could go all night and all day. He felt like people were cheering him on, and he could practically hear their applause as he slew one raven after another. The Iblis Stone and the Skyrim Core. Two artifacts from the time of legends. Renato was becoming a legendary hero, wasn't he? He had enough power to save the rebellion, but he had to understand this power, so he would not misuse it. liable to explode if you upset them. Feeling a bit peckish. There were stickers all over the platform for really hot lady foxes, with pictures and addresses and everything. The toads at the observatory measured the stone with their occult devices. I fed it the core of Sky Ripper, explained Renato. No more feeding planet souls.
But the core is not an unlimited energy source,
said one toad. Another said,
there's a feedback loop, you see, which could overload the stone. Yeah, the stone doesn't actually feed on souls,
claimed a third.
But on pain of killing another sentient being. If you can truly be at peace with yourself, it would not overload.
This was all very confusing. At peace? Yes, the mountains were peaceful and quiet, but he now had the power to turn the tides. He should report to the Rebellion Council and prepare for the decisive battle.
Couldn't make sense of anything the toads said, and listening to them argue made him restless. The Iblis Stone had made him a power in his own right. The core had kicked the Iblis Stone out of his head by filling it with more power than it could eat. It was time to meet the leadership of the rebellion. It was time to go to the ruins where they had hidden their secret base.
He was ready for anything the Ravens could throw at him. His sword felt ready too. It seemed to know what he wanted most. It was definitely easier to fight inanimate objects. More and more extraordinary. frigid north was really useful for making popsicles and birdicles.
Is a very cool sword, thought Renara. No, seriously. He couldn't feel his paw anymore.
Wasn't pestering him anymore. Good. He didn't want to chit-chat, not with anybody. He didn't want to think about Zenobia or Lapino. He just wanted to fight. Don't look down, he thought.
Almost fun. Pain of killing another sentient being? What was that toad talking about anyway? He felt no pain, only pleasure as each filthy raven fell by his sword and the stone glowed brighter and brighter. And all the while, those voices were cheering him on, like he was in the arena, winning bout after bout.
Put a railing on this thing, he thought. Renata remembered when he'd first stolen one of these. Good times.
I need more materials, thought Renato.
He was creating employment for. Truly, he was a job creator. Why don't you guys fight in groups? I know, because there's no I in team. Long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good.
Oh yeah, that's how you do it.
It was something he liked to do, but only after he'd killed all the witnesses. There was blood on this one. It hadn't saved its owner.
He slew and slew across the ruins and into the labyrinth that hid the secret rebel base. He was surprised not to see any defenders or even any of the council toads. When he reached the council chambers, there were still no toads, only filthy ravens. "Stop him! He's gone mad!" one raven shouted until he had hacked them all down. There was not a single toad anywhere. No doubt they'd all been taken prisoner, so it was up to him to take revenge upon the Imperial fleet.
But where had they taken the council? It couldn't be good that the Empire had not only found the secret rebel base, but killed or captured everyone there, no matter. He was on a roll. He headed full speed towards the Imperial fleet. He would be the fox who took down 100 warships. He charged, The Imperial fleet was huge and deadly, but he was deadlier.
The crowd was cheering him on. He could practically hear it. Reynardo, the hero of the rebellion.
Sharp? Check. Pointy? Check. Flexible? Check. What else do you need in a sword? He'd once met a pirate captain who used hooks to get around his ship. Oh, what was his name? Well, they really needed to redecorate anyway. Good thing Reynardo didn't have vertigo. the ravens. Nobody said they were original. As he slew his way across the fleet, Renato thought he could hear a small voice whispering in his ear. "Collect your gauntlet, you idiot!"
Oh, for heaven's sake, he thought. Can I be alone in my own head? Look at the stone. I'm busy, he told the voice. Talk later. Then it will be too late, cried the voice. Don't be so bloody thick. Piss off, he told the voice and kept up his slaying. Am I right? Confront the Emperor. Funny that this Cold War had come about because the Emperor feared death. And now it was coming for him. There was some sort of lesson there, wasn't there? There was the Emperor. Renato cut down his elite guard. The exalted Toad cowered fearfully. He had sought to evade death and only made death come to him faster. Renato savored the moment. And then, too quick, it was over. He stood over the dead Emperor. "Death to tyranny!" he shouted. "Go, House, go!" Zenobia stepped out of the shadows. "You have to stop," she said. "You've killed everyone. Our ravens, your rebels. You murdered the whole rebel council." "What?" "Oh, the ravens killed the council. You big idiot. They don't even know what the secret base is," shouted Lapino, who was with her for some stone. Said Zenobia. "It was black as night. Blacker. But I fed it the core," said Renato. "It was glowing." "Well, who needs the core?" he said, and he attacked. Zenobia conjured her best, and Lapino hopped around like a mad rabbit, but he killed them both easily. I am unstoppable, he orated at the blood-soaked walls. I alone shall be emperor. The tiny voice inside him screamed, that doesn't even sound like you, you big fanny. The stone has stolen your mind. But he ignored it. Who listens to voices in their heads anyway? Madmen, that's who. Renato stared at the book. He was still alive. Again. And still only flying away from burning Ubar. Had he lived that adventure? Or only dreamt it? Had he really died? It felt so real, not like a dream at all. And he'd lost again. Oh, he hated that. But he had made different choices. And he'd lost in a different way. It was the book, wasn't it? Oracles showed you your destiny. But this was showing him different ways he could die miserably. Thanks a bunch, book, he thought. But these were destinies that he did not have to fulfill. But he'd learn another true thing. The Iblis Stone was evil. It would try to corrupt anyone who used it. But that meant there must be a destiny where he survived and won, right? Otherwise, what was the point? And with that, the book's pages fluttered back once more to the beginning, and the clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis Stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. On the other hand, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Lapino was no game changer, but could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Every child knew about the Sky Ripper. The Transcendent Emperor had buried its pieces deep. And then, this Emperor's horrific sacrifices had brought it back to the surface. Renato wasn't exactly sure how to use the legendary weapon. But surely, there must be some way to do it without provoking another catastrophe. Had he, somehow, summoned the long-lost components of the legendary weapon out of the deep places of the Earth? It was more than Renato could fathom. But if he could find a legendary weapon, he would use it. As he set foot on the island, Renato could not help but feel a tinge of guilt. He'd left Lapino behind. He hoped the Mad Rabbit had somehow escaped the Ravens. He hoped they hadn't eaten him. If they had, he hoped they hadn't eaten him alive. Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper? Renato never made plans that required constant vigilance. He was a hero. He didn't think too much. He just went with his gut and hoped it all worked out. The Sky Ripper was a long shot. He'd have to devote himself to it. No side journeys, no rescuing old friends. That was against his nature. Could he stick with it? I bet I could make my sword better, thought Renato. What was the point of this gate? Did they think no one would notice the lever? The people who had built this castle, did they even know what monstrous weapon lay hidden within their walls? The Sky River could destroy anything it touched, or so the legends say. As the Transcendent Emperor had fought the lost gods, thousands of thousands had died. But Bernardo had been through wars. The only merciful war was a short one. Practically sure he'd find something useful in one of these things. What's there? Anyone put his slinky collection in a strongbox, thought Renato. Magic slinkies? There was something else.
so much. It was time to turn it into something he could use. It was a bit windy up here. Touché, she said, and died. Did your mother tell you it's rude to stare? Snapped Renato, a little smug. Not really. Puzzle. Renato loved puzzles, except when he couldn't figure them out. On the other hand, if there was a puzzle, it was probably meant to keep people away from something good. Once again, Renato was dead right. Or actually just dead. Renato had heard stories of a dungeon where chests were filled with potions and weapons. Fairy tales. That had been his mistake before, thinking he could win a battle of wills with an ancient evil all by himself. He had to be cleverer than that. Or braver. Or something. There it was. Skyripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway.
The device was intricate. No one alive had the skill to make a thing like it. How was it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Skyripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. Renato asked himself why he changed course to confront Zenobia. He'd no idea. Sometimes he would just do things, and he could never figure out why he'd done them. Usually, they worked out. After all, he was a hero. The truth is, though, he wanted to see her, wasn't it? It had been a dozen years since Swordfu School. He'd followed every rumor about her, every scrap of news. Not that he still loved her. After all, she was his enemy. No, it was solely because, know your enemy. But it would be great to see her. Even if they faced off across sword points, as they'd done so many times at school. The world was a less interesting place without her. Behind door number 2. Slippy's hit, he thought. Say goodnight, Gracie, said Renato, wondering who Gracie was. Wasn't entirely sure how he was going to capture Zenobia. She'd be expecting him. And he didn't have Lapino to cook up a clever plan. Why was it again that he hadn't got the core? Maybe because the results tended to be disastrous. These streets were familiar. The Sword Fu School was closed now, but he had been down that street 1,000 times. He knew that pub. He knew that alley. He knew the alley behind it much too well. No wonder Zenobia had chosen to invade this island herself. Renato slinked through Zenobia's ship, making no sound at all. Where were her guards? Finally, he reached her bedroom. She was curled up on her bed. Oh, he'd forgotten how beautiful she was. How sleek, how soft. He tapped her on the shoulder with his sword. She vanished. And he suddenly noticed he couldn't move except his mouth. In fact, soon he couldn't keep his mouth shut. He told Zenobia everything. Skyripper, the Iblistone, even where the secret rebel base was, until he was hoarse. It was some kind of truth spell. A talky truth spell. She called her father by Farspeaker Toad and filled His Majesty in.
But why didn't he get the core?
Speaker in something like His Majesty's croak. Because I missed you, darling. Renato grinned. He doesn't even know why, frowned Zenobia.
That makes no sense. It's a trap,
shouted the Emperor.
I'll meet you at the outpost, and I'll bring my interrogators.
If Renato came face to face with the Emperor, maybe he could assassinate him. But maybe it would be smarter and safer to turn Zenobia against her father.
You're lying, she said. Somehow you're lying.
The spell hadn't worn off yet. He had to tell the truth. The trick was in making sure she wouldn't believe it.
The core is perfectly safe, he said. And he tried his hardest to sound sincere.
So is the Iblis Stone. In fact, I was trying to get them myself. Fine then, interrogators it is, she said angrily. I gave you a chance.
The Emperor's interrogators were not especially gentle, even by Weasel standards.
Fortunately, Zenobia had locked him in the guest quarters on her ship.
And she'd forgotten it had a toilet that, like all skyship toilets, could be vented into the abyss.
This was not the sort of slippery fox he wanted to be. But just as they were about to land, he threw the latch, wrinkled his nose, and leapt through the open latrine.
It was a short, safe landing. At least this part of the Nexus hadn't changed too much. Zenobia had been taking him to the Imperial outpost. She'd never expect him to go there by himself. Well, maybe she would. You never knew with her. And this is why heroes are called dashing, Renato thought. See? Dashing? Get it? Yeah. A very clever engineer named Elon Muskrat had got his start making floating platforms. Not many people knew that. Renato knew Zenobia, and Zenobia knew him. He suspected a trick. Now he'd vanished. She would probably guess that was his plan all along. Perfect. Maybe she wouldn't use the Sky Ripper. At least not without taking it to the scientists at the observatory first. Meanwhile, the Emperor would be coming to the outpost personally. This could be good. Giving the Emperor all of the rebellion's secrets hadn't been quite the disaster he'd thought. It had drawn the Emperor out of the safety of his fleet. Renato could sneak into the outpost, and in a few sword strokes, he could win the war. But the Emperor would be surrounded by his elite guard. Renato wondered if there was anything he could say that would confuse the old toad even more. Use words instead of his sword? Didn't want their things broken, they really ought to make them stronger.
Reynardo was face to face with the Emperor's bodyguard. They looked very tough, but the Emperor held them back.
Oh, where's my daughter?
And how would I know that? Reynardo grinned at him.
She lured me here so that you could kill me, didn't she?
Ah, don't be ridiculous, said Reynardo, trying his best to sound convincing. She loves you.
Oh, I knew it. The rabbit told me I couldn't trust her.
The Emperor hopped out the door. His phalanx of bodyguards retreated carefully. Reynardo heard someone call, "Arrest her!" as they left. Well, that's a job well done, thought Reynardo. Now the fleet will be in all sorts of disarray. But maybe he could find her in the mountains. She always used to go to the mountains to hide from the world. Maybe he could even turn her against her father. Or maybe he could reap the benefits of the chaos he had sown. It was time to report to the Rebel Council, and then launch the attack on a divided and very confused Imperial fleet. Reynardo felt very clever indeed. He'd told the Empire nothing but the truth, and now they suspected everything and everyone. So, why are you going to see Zenobia? He asked himself. It's not just a gloat, is it? No, of course not. Now, turning her against her father was good. It was very good. If she would actually join the rebels, that would be spectacular, right? That was definitely what he was doing. He wondered if he should have just told her the truth about her father. The Emperor had adopted her from a stray. That was the source of all her loyalty. But even then, he had been dreaming of a bargain with the lost gods. They alone could make him immortal. The Emperor would have to seal that bargain with the life of someone who truly loved him. And who else truly loved the Emperor? But how could Reynardo tell her that now? Why would she ever believe him? Reynardo hoped his mother wasn't watching. He was sort of yanking his own chain, wasn't he? This was much easier than free climbing. The funny thing was, she should have trusted him. He told her the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Oh, all right. The truth was, and how often had he ever done that? She was so smart. Smarter than him, really.
Renado's paws were getting numb. Calaveras really didn't want company, did he? Pathway made Renado curious. See? With enough leverage, you could go anywhere. If only he had some way to break the ice. Or convince it he was a friend. Renado had given away the location of the secret base. Fortunately, the Emperor thought it was all a trap. He even mistrusted his own daughter. Renado couldn't have done better if he'd planned it.
What have you done to me? Zenobia demanded. My own father thinks I'm a traitor. So? But I'm loyal. So what? You're a bastard, Renado, she said. Now, you love that about me. You really did want the core, didn't you? And the Iblis stone. Yep. He gloated. You get all that? She said to the far speaker Toad he'd failed to spot.
I am so relieved, my daughter,
said the far speaker. And Zenobia got into her ship and flew off. Damn it. The old far speaker trick. How had he missed it? This was very bad. Zenobia back in her father's good graces, and both of them ready to use the core and the Iblis stone. He got back on the Farfarer. Briefly, Renato thought of fleeing. The odds were surely against him. Never tell me the odds, he told himself. Odds confused him. He preferred to trust his gut. And so he sailed on to attack the fleet. Alone, if necessary. There were not many rebels here, and they were disorganized. The Empire had obviously attacked the secret base, the formerly secret base whose location Renato had so helpfully pinpointed on a map. There was still time to turn around, wasn't there? But Renato hated turning around. Heroes don't turn around, they just own their screw-ups and turn them into impossible victories, right? What were these poles exactly? Parking meters from the time of the lost gods? I'd have thought. Thing was, Renado's personal battle was going fairly well. The Ravens immediately in front of him were no quicker or tougher than usual. Where was the power of the core, blasting him off into the abyss? And where was Zenobia? She must be up to something. But whatever it wasn't his problem. Not yet, anyway. It was all going surprisingly well. Renado had always wanted a flying carpet. This was more like a flying dip. But it was loose. Confront the Emperor. Again. This time, he'd make an end of him. He'd screwed up last time, but he had a good feeling about this time. Just have a dash, thought Renado. At last, he came to Zenobia and the Emperor.
She was sealing up a kind of squat coffin, banded with lead.
So glad you're here.
Croaked the Emperor.
You will be witness to my final victory.
That's creepy, Dad, said Zenobia. But thank you. Because of your shenanigans, we tested the core. It's really unstable. It could have blown us all up.
It could, said Renato, a little frustrated that she'd figured it out.
Anyway, we already destroyed your secret base, so we don't need a super weapon. We're just going to bury it. Do we, torture you? Or give you a medal? Sometime later, Renato got an invitation to attend the Emperor's ritual sacrifice of his daughter. They took him out of his dungeon cell and gave him all his medals to wear. A little while after that, the lost gods returned, and the sun went black, and the Emperor ate his soul. And just like that, he was alive again, and back on the Farfarer, still fleeing burning Ubar. The book was still open before him. So, the book was a portal. It took you to the future, when your destinies would branch. He had failed and died 3 times, but he'd learned another true thing. Zenobia still had feelings for him. But he was starting to feel like he was getting the hang of this. There was a way through to victory. He could feel it. He just had to keep running the path of destinies. With that, the book fluttered back to the beginning, and he fell into it. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer.
Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. On the other hand, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing.
Lapino was no game changer, but could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Lapino. Apparently, the Mad Rabbit had sold a Pegasus that he did not exactly own. Lapino always wiggled out of trouble, given time. But he was out of time. The Ravens had figured out that Lapino was a rebel spy. If the fleet reached him first, they'd string him up for that. Never mind the winged horse. Lapino had apparently managed to confuse the judge by arguing that he hadn't actually stolen the winged horse. He'd only sold it. But wait, where was the prison? The village was empty. Had everybody fled the Ravens? Ravens had taken the town. Renato had seen villages emptied like this.
All the people taken away to be sacrificed in the Emperor's secret rituals. Bernardo hoped the people were just hiding.
Or from the mystical East could make time itself slow for you.